contracted in retirement to write the Chaplain's Handbook for the United States Army, which I have placed up on my Facebook before. So if anyone visits my Facebook, feel free to have a blast, scroll down and keep scrolling down. You'll find it. I've posted it a few times. The Satanic Chaplains, it's the handbook for all chaplains in the U.S. Army, written by the Satanic Chaplain. They didn't contact a rabbi, a priest, a deacon, or some kind of lay brother. They contacted a Satanist to make that chaplain's handbook out so that other chaplains of other faiths wouldn't interfere. I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, we can hear you, Maggot.
Okay.
Vinnie,
wait a minute,
Maybe I need to say that in a what's it called? a drill instructor voice. We can hear you, Maggot.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but by the way, I do want to complete that thought with September 11th. The fact remains that the Pentagon's birthday is General Leslie Groves, who's known to Americans as the father of the atomic bomb, is known to the lay public for the wrong reasons. Just as the military amateurs are captivated by the drama and the romance of the Afrika Korps, many people remember Field Marshal Irvin Rommel by the exploits of the Deutsche Afrika Korps. The reality was that his most militarily important period of time during the war was not with the Afrika Korps at all, but when he was recalled to Europe to build the beach defenses at Normandy. These were built to such a degree of precision that they were able to almost upset and throw off the D-Day invasion even after his death, and because of their ingenious method of layout and construction. Now, what was the reason for his death was General Irvin Rommel insisted to Adolf Hitler that they deploy the atomic bombs to turn those beaches into glass. That's why there's an actual quote by that actor who's quoting him directly at the beginning of The Longest Day, that movie, where Field Marshal Irvin Rommel is shown pointing at the beach and saying, "Not one single Allied soldier will reach that beach." And the reason why I wanted to deploy the nukes, and Adolf Hitler said no. And the very reason why was because they had deployed them at Courland. They had deployed them in October of 1944 to stop the Soviet advance. That's Courland, Courland, Kurland in German. That Courland was held all the way past the fall of Berlin. There were still German troops holding Kurland. And the reason for this was they needed to expedite the largest maritime evacuation in human recorded history. They were able to take thousands of people that they considered to be Nordic, Germanic, Aryans out of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Baltic littoral, through the Courland beachhead that they maintained even after the fall of Berlin. So this was known as Operation Hannibal. It was headed by Kriegsmarine Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz of the U-boat arm of the German Navy. That's one of the reasons why he was made Führer of the Third Reich after Adolf Hitler. And so he basically was expediting to the last that massive evacuation of civilians. So the atomic bomb, when it was deployed, that stopped the Soviet advance, it was made known to Adolf Hitler that it was permanently damaging human cells, that the human body had no immunosystem that could ward off radiation the way it could ward off disease. So Adolf Hitler felt that it was imperative that never be deployed in the continent of Europe again as a genetic threat to the future generations of Aryan man. And as a result, he said we could use it long distance in Russia, we could use it against the Americans, but never on the continent of Europe again. He refused to allow Rommel to deploy it on the Normandy beaches and ordered Rommel to kill himself because Rommel said that if you do not allow me to use it, I would rather be dead, because as a military man, I cannot stand by without deploying this new asset. And so the end result was the death of Irvin Rommel, the D-Day invasion, and that was Adolf Hitler's ideology was strong enough to prevent him from deploying the atomic bombs on his own continent. So that is that's truly the result of that situation, and we could go into it from there. The American atomic bomb situation was with General Leslie Groves, and what General Leslie Groves was responsible for, as according to all military and bureaucratic people who are truly established areas of power, as far as concerned, was not for the building of the atomic bomb that they recognize him for. They recognize him for the building of the Pentagon. And so that happened on September 11th of 1941, months before Pearl Harbor, where the Americans and said, we're going to start the largest war that has ever occurred in the history of mankind. We're going to need the largest office building in the world from which to administer it. So he turned the first spade of dirt in a groundbreaking ceremony on September 11th, 1941, even as Charles Augustus Lindbergh was lecturing across the Potomac River, or the Potomac, to basically protest the establishment of an American New World Order and empire. And because they needed all the metal in the United States that was available for tanks and ships and guns and planes, they didn't use any metal to build the Pentagon. It was all built out of concrete. There was no cables that were used for elevators. There was nothing but ramps, and there was no metal in the building whatsoever. They even stripped the monorail from the Golden Gate Bridge for the war effort. And the end result was you had a total concrete building. And yet, on September 11th of 2001, when those attacks took place, at one side, the fifth side, the west side of the Pentagon, was reinforced with concrete abutments, had sprinklers installed, which existed in no other part of a concrete building because concrete can't burn. Blast windows were installed, and fire exits. All of this allowed hundreds of people to escape who would otherwise have never escaped. So, and all the people who were normally there, about 45,000 people on any given day, were gone. That's why you had only 127 deaths in the Pentagon itself, none of them are high officers. So that's something to note about Pentagon.
I got 11 in the Pentagon. I mean, what do you reckon hit it? A plane or a missile or what?
I believe that there was a plane that hit the Pentagon, which 64 people were killed on the airliner, but maybe not. I can't commit myself to that. There's so many conflicting bits of evidence concerning all of this. Something very strange did occur. I do believe that the planes went missing, that everybody who was on the planes were dead, ultimately wound up dying. Certainly, I believe a plane crashed in that one area, that one state, name I keep forgetting, out in that debris field, because I knew some security guards who worked there regarding the wreckage. So that is what got me believing that. And,
Flight 93.
In terms of,
Douglas, what do you think about the bombs that were in the basement of the Twin Towers, though? Because that is another part of it.
The bombs in the basement of the Twin Towers, you're not talking about the original Twin Towers bombing, you're talking about the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely was an inside series of explosions that made the building collapse in its own footprint. Now, that, of course, whenever I talk about the Twin Towers, I speak of them in the more strategic sense and the impact of what happened with their destruction as opposed to the technical aspect of it, because there's so many engineers who have just dedicated their lives to speaking about Twin Towers. So what I can say about the Twin Towers is, first of all, there was an enormous debris field. There was that. And people who were living in New York were talking about the falling bodies, the falling bits of debris that were large enough to crush the shells or the overall bodies of cars, which are not very sturdily built these days anyway, collapse the roofs in. The chaplain of New York City Fire Department died when a body fell on his head and killed him. So there were bodies that were falling out, and for a while thereafter, people who were taking out their babies in strollers to walk in the morning could see just these debris fields that went on for quite some bit away from the Twin Towers that were full of mangled bodies, limbs, heads, identifiable body parts, blood, and it was all cleaned up very quickly, very effectively. The U.S. government wouldn't let anyone talk about it, and the whole reason behind that was a number of reasons. Obviously, the government participated in it. They were doing their best to hide everything that took place, and the other horrible part of it is they didn't want people dwelling on it because they didn't want a anti-Islamophobic kind of backlash. And the first thing that George Bush Jr. did with the collapse of the Twin Towers was he got on television and said Islam is a religion of peace. And he did everything he could while every single other plane, including military planes, were grounded in the United States. He did everything he could to get Osama bin Laden's relatives, which there were hundreds in Boston, shipped out of the United States to safety in the peninsula of the House of Saud. And so we definitely have a cooperative effort going on between the Bush dynasty and the House of Saud throughout all of this. So,
but by the way, Douglas, like Vinnie, I'm I'm Vinnie's producer. I learned more in the last 2 hours behind the scenes on the show than I think I've learned in the last 6 months. So I
think
know what started.
That's also probably because Douglas speaks so fast he can cram 6 months worth of radio listenership into about 2 hours.
I really appreciate that.
Well, I
don't know.
I don't know about that, but Douglas, I'm anxious to know what gave you such a fertile mind to take you down this track to be able to articulate so much authentic history. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're kind of a shaman in that way. You're really on to what really is going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Well, a lot of it had to do with, for one thing, I was paid under the table by many officers who were bucking for promotion to basically plagiarize their version of term papers for their peer review boards. So I was basically writing term papers for officers' promotions. And so to speak, I used that.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Wow!
And I would tell them that there was so much more they could write about than the same propagandistic myths, and they said, no, that's not going to get me promoted. People want to hear we kicked all ass and won the war. As a matter of fact, General Petraeus, the man who was placed in charge of the Central Intelligence Agency, who had an enormously high position as a 5-star general within the Army establishment, and the Army essentially effectively conquered the CIA, basically instituted a junta over the CIA through General Petraeus. This individual got promoted on the basis of a term paper which said the United States won the Vietnam War. That was reviewed by his office peers, and they gave him a huge promotion, a series of promotions on the basis of this myth, and he actually made the claim the United States never lost a single military battle in the Vietnam War. Well, the United States lost 50 military engagements in the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War truly was in many ways a military disaster. That's not to say that the troops didn't do their best under the most adverse of conditions, but for him to propagate a lie like that, get promotions for it, shows you some of the challenges I was dealing with. So I had to deal with the truth, twist it into a lie, and so that the Americans, now your entire high command believes those lies. General Petraeus believes those lies. The men who serve under him believe those. That's why the United States is losing every war it fights. And that's why I become kind of like, as you say, a shaman in this regard, as somebody who worked with twisting the truth into those lies for pay.
By the way,
I can see it.
By the way, Douglas, do you write a daily blog, or do you write articles, or do you pontificate on this in terms of writing? I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just fascinated with who you are and how you articulate this stuff.
No, I appreciate your saying that. Another way that I articulate was I was trying to get a lateral transfer into think tanks at the time, but the think tanks did not accept me because I was not saying what they wanted to hear. When I pointed out the imminent collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1980s, and I said the Soviet Union will not last through the decade of the 1990s, you'll be lucky if it makes it through the 80s. They didn't laugh at me. They knew what I was saying was true. But the think tankers, RAND/MIT, and the various others contracting with the Pentagon said, look, we make our money telling the Pentagon what it wants to hear, so it makes its money telling the public that they're under constant threat from the Soviet Union. We can't tell them what you have to say. And therefore, I never got employed by them, even though my presentations were professional and much appreciated by them. That was another way I got my delivery perfected. But in terms of writing, the writing is very difficult, and I have a lot of health issues, and the keyboarding gets very tiresome. I do quite a bit of it, much more than I would like. I'll try to get some books out soon enough. There are some impeding factors just in terms of schedule, the deals that we're trying to set up with publishers, the sensitivity of the issues that I'm talking about. So I do put a lot of posts on my Facebook, and that's where people can find most of my articles and posts and columns. I do write out at length. I probably post more on Facebook than almost anybody in terms of not on a daily basis, but in the length of what I say and refining what I say to try and get people to understand details. Because
Douglas, what do you need next, and how can me and Vinnie and everyone that supports his shows be of support to you, Douglas? What can we do to help you now?
I feel that the best that could happen is what you're doing. Hopefully, we will have more of an opportunity to speak on this subject. And that way we can set up more.
I sent you an invite. I sent you an invite on my Skype, so you can add me anytime.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what is your? Are you willing to your Skype ID over the air, or I'll probably recognize it when I see it?
Oh, no, I don't care. I'm like Vinnie. I'm an open book. My Skype is movie MOVIE capital CAPITALCEO. That's my handle. And
okay.
I've already sent you an invite. I've already sent you an invite on Skype, so you'll have it. But I will boldly go where no producer's gone before. You actually need to be a regular contributor to the Vinnie Eastwood show. And here's my request of you, Douglas. If there is a breaking story that you have a totally different take on, because we are being lied to, my dear friend, about everything. You know, it's so out of control. You might be able to come in for a segment or two on that day and just really break down what's really going on. Because I always thought the U.S. military was being used by the New World Order as a global police force, but I didn't realize the U.S. is technically the New World Order unless they get collapsed out.
Right. No, absolutely. That's the reality of the paradigm. It is the U.S. empire through its military, which is in the middle of massive collapse, which is why our greatest threat is anarchy. And I would be happy to act as a consultant coming in on impromptu on days when I'm needed. Believe me, I've been seeking that position for quite some time. We're hoping to establish it coast to coast.
Vinnie would be the perfect platform only because the show is growing. Vinnie and I are very much on the same page that we're living in this world where if you tell people what they want to hear, you get everything. But when you tell people the reality of really what's going on, they're doing it as a loving, kind, sympathetic human being, wanting to, make our world a better place. I'm 55, so everything I do in 2012, Douglas, is for the year 2050. I'm trying to stop 2050 in 2012.
I think that's an excellent objective, and believe me, you're operating from a position of pure intent, and I think that we'll succeed because we really have everything in our favor, and the established powers really have many things working against them. That is why there are many propagandists who try to portray the U.S. government as all powerful and omniscient. They can round you up in camps. They can take your guns away. Those are the last line of defense that the government has, the shackles of the mind. And by getting people high on negative energy, anxiety about what the government's going to do, and then making them think that the government's so powerful that nothing that they can do matters, then people fall into apathy. They get this negative high, fall into apathy, and the end result is nothing is done. That is the last thing keeping the masses down, is that government propaganda system. And our way of working with genuine information dissemination is the only way of defeating that. That's what's going to bring us into a renaissance much sooner, and hopefully we can do our best to mitigate the dark age. We probably cannot stop it, but we can mitigate its length, we can mitigate its effects.
See, what's really interesting is Vinnie and I, when we get together for our weekly production meeting, Douglas, one of the things that we're looking to do, see, the show currently, our audience, our average listener is between 40 years of age and 65. So Vinnie was brilliant and had Tia Tequila on his show. And so we want to make it hip as a young person, Douglas, to be part of this movement. That's what we really want to do. That it's hip to stop drinking soft drinks, that it's hip to not drink fluoridated water, that it's hip to tell your doctor to go fax off because you're not going to take Ritalin, you're not going to take Zoloft, you're not going to go along with their bullshit. See?
Right. No, definitely. I hear you.
And I think of it done in a highly non-violent way. You know what I'm saying? Because if we don't use violence, we have already won.
That's true. You're absolutely right. Well, that's what they fear the most. They want violence because when they get the violence, they can respond with violence. So by threatening them with non-violence, they are left impotent. So definitely, appreciate your offer. I'm going to Skype you with my own Skype name soon because I'm so retarded. I'm still stuck in the 20th century. I probably won't know how to look up your Skype ID when you offered me the Skype friendship. So you're movie capital, and that's just.
I'm movie capital CEO, but I actually sent you an invite, Douglas.
Okay. CEO.
So you'll get it.
CEO. Okay.
And what I'll also do is I'll place in here my personal email, so you're welcome to email me here, okay?
Excellent. Wonderful. That will help immensely because I'm so retarded otherwise when it comes to the modern technology.
I also want to suggest something else. There's something else I could also suggest, Douglas. There's a couple of if we'd have to actually record your voice, slow it down, but there's actually 2 programs on the market that have about a 99.9% accuracy that will transfer anything that you say into proper written text. So be aware that that's another way to get your message out there, because there are authors that I've known that do all of their writing through dictation, or they record what they're saying and then the software converts it to written text.
Wonderful. That will help immensely because probably my manager, ultimately my manager will discuss this with you, and that way she will be able to transcribe the books because I'm such a terrible writer. I still have that Department of Defense indoctrinated writing format style, and my writing is pretty much inaccessible to a lot of the public. They just think it's too turgid. So that would help.
And Douglas, here's what's really interesting. How I woke up was there's a guy in San Francisco by the name of Paul Thompson. I don't know if you ever met him, but he was the original one who freaked out so bad after 9/11 that he got on a plane and he moved to New Zealand for 2 years. And from New Zealand, he did the 9/11 timeline. And I got to meet that guy 2 years after 9/11. He is back living in San Francisco now because he realized after being in New Zealand, he wouldn't be accepted here. He wasn't part of the culture. And whatever was going to come down, he actually felt safer in San Francisco. So,
wow, that's interesting. I mean, I'd like to meet him sometime, and certainly feel free to give him my phone number and address, and hopefully I can communicate with him for a while. I'm not quite sure he and I would see eye to eye on quite a bit. I mean, I can't stand being here. I'm more stranded here than I am living here. If it weren't for rent control, I would indeed be another homeless veteran, and that is something that is so, it's probably emphasized enough. I'll tell you something. When I went on Red Ice Creations Radio and came under enormous attack, then what happened was that many of the people were emphasizing, and how can you afford to live in San Francisco? Obviously, they're unfamiliar with the rent control, but they're absolutely right. The flat next to me is $4,000 a month, and it's exactly the same size as my flat. Can you imagine that? That's why everyone in San Francisco is younger, lives in communes. Each one of them, you have to have like 6 living in a flat just to pay the rent every month. It's a nightmare. The city is unlivable for any number of reasons. It's a very, very strange environment. Why anyone would come back here is a mystery to me. As I said, if I were for rent control stranding here, I would have left a long time ago. Plus all of the books, all of the property that I have, which is just books. I have no car. I have no home because I rent. I have no family members left alive. That is so important when you discern any whistleblower. If any whistleblower's got a family, they got any property, I hate to say this, but in reality, they can't be real. Because that's the first thing they hit. That's the first thing they hit. They will take everyone you know and love. They will take all your property, real estate. Your car will be repossessed. So I've got none of that for them to do that to. So that's the difference between.
But what if you voluntarily sell and give away all your possessions when they try to come after you? You don't have anything anymore. Then they can't fuck with you, Douglas.
Well, there are some whistleblowers who do that. The only thing I have now is just books. They aren't going to go after that because they don't have any inventory on it. Other than that, I have a firearm left over from my old security days or two. It's really, that's the life I lead for now. It'll probably change. Hopefully it will change. I do have
Douglas, what is your dream? What would you like to do positive in your life? What is the legacy you'd like to leave behind? How can we help you?
Well, I think that by doing what we're doing and what we're planning right now, basically using the alternative information media to help people become aware of the reality. If I can eke a subsistence living off of that, that's fine. Make a documentary like the guy I did with Collapse, get that going. If I can get in contact with the producers, then we could get something done where we get some investors to put something into a solid DVD production. Because what I did was strictly guerrilla warfare style of just videotaping. I was dealing with every single shark in the pool. I knew that when I made those DVDs that I would be entering a swimming pool full of piranhas, and I was absolutely right, because the alternative information community in America is not just heavily infiltrated; it has its own safety mechanism in the form of predators. The predators were everywhere. The man who I initially linked up professionally turned out, and there was no way I could vet this in the beginning because I didn't have the money to do a private background investigation on everybody who was working with me. I just didn't have that kind of money. I had to get the video done. The man who was working with me turned out to be the son of a very high-ranking Air Force officer, and he actually took my PayPal account. He was a Cisco systems engineer. He was an IT guy. I hired him to do my website because I'm stuck in the 20th century. When I was working with the DoD, computer work was just beginning. DARPA had pretty much a monopoly on the internet, and we were just beginning to release the internet technology in increments. And I myself was doing very little work on the computer. It was hard copy. It was Rolodex. There were many reasons for this. One was the movie War Games. We convinced every single kid on a computer to hack into the DoD system to see if they could start a nuclear war. And the other was the fact that we had all of this danger of electromagnetic pulse. If a nuclear war, nuclear terrorism really did come across, then everything on the computer, including hard drive, floppy disk, was going to disappear. So everything was maintained for the longest period of time on hard copy and Rolodex. So I was very, very paper-oriented. And that's one of the reasons I couldn't get a job with a civilian library. I have a credit equivalent of a master's degree in library science. Couldn't get a job with a civilian library because I wasn't a modern computer librarian. Also, my specialty in document destruction and incineration was something they didn't need. So that was one of the things preventing that. But the reason that's pertinent to what we're talking about now is, like I said, I had money. I knew I had to hire someone to make a website. The guy I hired to do it turned out to be an Air Force officer's son. He wound up taking the PayPal account. So the one time I got Coast to Coast AM on Memorial Day and had a DVD to sell, all of the money went directly into his own bank account. And then he took my signature and electronically forged it and sold the DVD to Reality Entertainment. Now, I was able to stop that legally. When I got that legally stopped, got the DVD back, and all we're doing now is guerrilla marketing of the DVD. So we can make something that's professional, sell it in a professional manner through some investors we can take care of. That would probably help to establish me. I've got to get that book out. Then I have something more solid than just a DVD to pin the reputation and the future on. Then we can gradually work together to ultimately just have me out there more regularly. See, that's what gets the word out, is regularity. Once you get regularity out there, the regular exposure through professionals like yourself, then my manager would work with you, and we would probably get me established in something that people could recognize. I think
there are three baby steps here. One is really sorting out a blog where your views are out there daily. I know you're using Facebook. Facebook, unfortunately, to be blunt with you, they've now transitioned into this huge advertising money machine. So if you post something and you want everybody to see it, there's a little box and you click on it and it says, hey, if you want everyone to see your posting, you're going to have to pay us, $9 or $10 or $7 at Facebook. Yeah. So that's why it's actually better at some point if you have your own blog. The second thing is I will support you in whatever small way I can to introduce you to other talk show hosts, because I think the more you can just be interviewed on a weekly basis, will just help you.
Right. I think you're right, so, and I would love to do that with you. And like I say, because of my own retardation, I'll happily work with you personally. Also, of course, just get my manager involved. She can continue doing.
Hey, guess what? We're all retarded. We're all retarded. It's like me and Vinnie can't even take a real job anymore, man. My last income was March of this year, and what happens is once you start going down the rabbit hole, it goes pretty deep, man. I mean, did you ever think of the fact, Douglas, that the guy that's killing the U.S., that his name is betrayed us? I mean, think about that.
Yeah, well, it certainly sounds like it. I mean, I knew when I was working with Colonel Aquino, he ultimately told me the Army was going to reabsorb the CIA, and he had somebody in mind. He never mentioned Petraeus, but obviously someone was being groomed at the time. Whether that ultimately manifested in the person of Petraeus is open to speculation, but that's certainly the Army and the CIA have been in conflict for quite some time, and the CIA was trying to start wars that the Army couldn't follow up on. Ultimately, they held a coup to basically put the CIA back in its place. And, of course, that leaves us with the problem of a kind of the military with extending power, enforcing power.
Okay,
and
so here's the question I have for you, Douglas. What was the turning point? What year, what event caused the entire U.S. government to basically go rogue now? It's gone rogue.
Oh, well, that's easy, and that's very tragic, and the way that occurred was right after the end of the American Civil War, and what happened was in 1876, exactly 100 years to the day after, pretty much to the day after the establishment of the American Republic, just a century later. It was on November 7th of 1876 that a man named Samuel Tilden won the presidency of the United States by both popular vote and electoral vote. And Samuel Tilden was the Ralph Nader of his day. He had made his career on fighting military corruption, because what happened during the Civil War was the United States military was ransacking the South, and it was looting all of these palatial plantation estates. It was taking all of this fine china, everything that they were raiding and looting, and they were selling it on the black market, and the United States Army was making a killing. So in fighting that corruption of this black market economy, Samuel Tilden won the admiration of the American people. He won the presidency. He was basically the 16th, 17th, or 19th president, I can't remember, but he was basically your president. Well, the military-industrial complex couldn't stand for that. People might say, how can you use that term military-industrial complex for 1876? Well, the American Civil War was a railroad war. Every single major battle took place within 20 miles of track, and the rail barons ran the show. So when the rail barons in 1876 saw Samuel Tilden win the presidency, they said, this guy's going to come after us. We've got to knock him out. So they said, we're going to put a general in charge. So they took General Rutherford B. Hayes. They said, we're going to make him president. So they stole the electoral votes with a combination of threats and a combination of bribes
hold on a second.
Florida.
And no, they did it. They went, oh, B. Hayes, darling.
Yeah,
let him finish. Let him finish.
Yeah.
Hey, Douglas,
and so what they
go ahead, finish.
Well, what they did was they stole the electoral votes through bribery and threat from both Louisiana and both Florida, those states, and by one electoral vote and no popular votes, General Rutherford B. Hayes became president of the United States. Now, from that moment forward, every single president of the United States was a president-elect, not a president-elect. And that was when the United States military ran a pirate flag over the United States Republic. Now, one of the things General Rutherford B. Hayes did was he promised the South, okay, I'll withdraw military occupation, because the South was threatening to rebel again because of the illegal election. So he said, okay, I'll end the military occupation of the Confederate States of America. And that's when the Reconstruction came to a legitimate end. By that, I mean it came to a legal recognition that they were withdrawing the Union Army occupation from the Southern states, and the Great Compromise of 1877 was reached. And at that point in time, he said, we're going to use a lot of Confederate veterans and Union veterans and kill the Indians so we can expand the railroads all the way to the Pacific coast. And from that point forward, the United States Army waged one single battle massacre against every Indian for the next several years, up until World War I, essentially. Geronimo was the last solid Indian resistance fighter to die. That was in 1904. And he was beheaded, and his head taken to the Skull and Bones fraternity of Princeton, where it's kept to this day, where they swear the oath, Geronimo, while skulling this Indian warrior. And in terms of his dying, think of what I'm saying. From 1876 to 1904, the U.S. Army waged one battle against the American Indian population a week. By the end of that series of battles, about 1,400 of them, over 1,400 of them, 100,000 American Indians are known to have been killed in combat. That means that millions must have died collaterally. So that's the kind of genocide that took place all the way to the Pacific, leading the rails all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That's when they started fighting overseas, getting involved in the Spanish-American War, conquering the Philippines, all the rest of that. Since that time, America's been involved in non-stop war because they have to keep making war. That's what makes the profit. So that's when it all turned, was in 1876, with the selection of General Rutherford B. Hayes. Since that time, anyone who stood against them either fell or died. Truman, for ending the Pacific War, for settling for peace with Japan, they tried to kill him at Blair House. Basically, he was running for president for his second term, and just days before the election, a hit squad hit Blair House, where he was secretly living. No one knew about it except the military, which provided security. The White House was under repairs. The only thing that stopped the 33rd president of the United States from dying was the fact that he was driving his family home and his car broke down. If he had been a few minutes earlier on time to get home, he would have died along with the police officer and the security officer, who both died in the massacre at Blair House when a military hit squad hit Blair House. They said, oh, it was a Puerto Rican hit team because the Puerto Ricans want independence from the United States. Well, last time I checked, Puerto Rico is not a U.S. state. So this is the kind of crap they pulled. That's how Eisenhower terrorized. And the only time he mentioned the military-industrial complex was just before he retired. And so that kind of sway these bastards have and how they run the country. So, this is what we're talking about. By the way, after they weren't able to kill him, they arrested the majority of his cabinet. No less than 7, maybe the totality of his cabinet, between 7 to a dozen members of his cabinet were arrested for treason and put in jail. And that was a true administration. No one remembers this. And that's how the U.S. military runs the America, and ultimately, transitionally, and at a very, very frail and fragile the world, which is, it's all coming to an end now. They're collapsing, and this is our time to really just make people aware of how they failed with the Second World War, because that's where it all starts. That was the turning point of the 1876 junta. The Second World War, convinced everybody atomic bombs won the war, started the whole nuclear weapons industry. That's when they perverted everything in our economy towards that. That's what broke our banks. We spent trillions of dollars building nuclear weapons that disintegrate because of their own radiation. You see, the Chinese never did that. The Chinese had only a few hundred nukes. How do they stay in nuclear power with a few hundred nukes? Because until quite recently, all their nukes were run on clockwork mechanisms that didn't decay. And they were pointed at a single target. They would hit the target if they were launched, but it would just rewind the clockwork mechanisms every few months and keep them functioning practically forever. Whereas the Soviet Union and America had these electronic systems on their nukes that decay because of the radiation from inside the nuke, so they have to continually strip them and replace them, and therefore they've got multi-trillion-dollar industries which bankrupt the Soviet Union and which are bankrupting the United States. So that's what's going on with this. So, yes.
All right, now I'll say goodbye to Kathy. She's going to go to bed. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning or something.
Oh, no. I'm right here, Vinnie. I'm not going anywhere. I was just saying goodnight. I was just saying goodnight to Mr. Maggot over there.
Yeah. Good night, Maggot.
Full name.
Douglas, this is Stelios, known as the Greek. I just wanted to interject a little piece of information that will be more commonly known in the future, but not the near future. And I can speak from first-hand experience on this. As you know, when you mention the word nuclear or atomic or anything, it really is a nightmarish scenario, even a device in peacetime, because of the implications of how toxic these materials are. And it really shudders people down to the core when any discussion is brought up about this type of material. But the information I invite everyone here to consider is we found out, not only myself but others as well, is not to get into a scientific esoteric discussion here. I'm just going to lay it out real quick, that the crystalline structure of these very, very large elements, uranium and the synthesized plutonium, hafnium, einsteinium, such and such, are nothing more than antennas that concentrate, let's say, cosmic rays. And once these materials are shielded from the input coming from outer space, within a few days they become non-radioactive. And once the shielding is removed from them, again, like an antenna, they charge up and give off these emissions. And make a long story short, we found that lead is a piss-poor shield, and aluminum, layers of aluminum and organic material make a better shield. So again, if you were to mention this information to any academic institution, they would laugh at you, but it is provable, and this information will be going out to mitigate these materials. And if you understand nature, you'll see that these materials are mined from areas way deep beneath the earth that offer this natural shielding, not by lead, but by various oxides. I just wanted to put this out, that whenever you hear anything about toxic radiation, there is a quote-unquote cure for it. And it's not out right now because the academics will never acknowledge it, even though you can do it on an 8th grade science lab. So I just wanted to invite everyone here to consider that.
Right. So, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's way above my head.
Well, it's not. Just if you know how an antenna works, if you block off an antenna and it can't receive a signal, it doesn't emit anything on the tube, right, on the set or the radio. And these materials, once they're mined and concentrated, because you have to really tear apart a large mountain to just make a tablespoon of this stuff, right? And it's in such concentrated form that that's why we have the problems that we do with it. And also, another thing to consider is once these materials are brought to the surface, nature wants to contract and compress them, and it typically brings on very strange weather patterns. It's another thing. So once we can prove, now this would be signing one's epitaph, that any radioactive material can be rendered unradioactive by putting a probe in a container with it and simply shielding it with thin layers of alternating aluminum and organic material. After a few days, it renders neutral. And then once you remove the shielding, it takes about 3 or 4 days to be charged up again. And if you look at a lot of these nuclear devices and weapons, the health of these weapons has to be maintained, right?
Right.
And that's one of the things that they do, because they have to open what they do is actually open the actual ballistic delivery system and expose the core as much as possible to atmospheric conditions so it could recharge.
Okay. That's, I mean, I'll certainly accept what you say. I'm not going to contest it. And the important thing to remember is I was exposed to an enormous amount of things that I would take down and copy, and that would include blueprints that I would trace, and I would later on, only very, very recently in my life, try to reconstruct these on a much more functional level with people who do have engineering training, and they have to take my notes and my sketches and do what they can with them. And sometimes I drew conclusions that were very different from the initial impressions that I got. So even I have to update some of what I say on the basis of continual interaction with people who are performing kind of engineering archaeology with me into the past. And that's why it's so important to talk to people like you, and you can put things into perspective for me, because my training was originally in library science and certainly not engineering. And but definitely, I want to thank Maggot for what he said about Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because for some reason, I don't know why, but that name keeps